All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing well. Today is an exciting day because we're going to do the final two chapters of Animal Farm by George Orwell. So let's finish up this interesting story with the beginning of chapter 9. Now, if this is your first time watching, this is not an ordinary reading. We're not just going to read all of the words. We will stop and talk about interesting words and phrases. So if you are an advanced learner of English, this is the perfect opportunity to learn new words and phrases. So if you're watching live with me, and speaking of watching live, Amir says hello on YouTube. Hello, Amir. How are you doing this morning? So if you're watching live, I encourage you to make questions in the comments. And if I see them, I will stop and talk about any words or phrases where you have questions or you're not sure. If you don't ask questions, I will just stop sometimes at words I think could be useful for you, or words or phrases you probably don't know very well. So let's get started with chapter 9 of Animal Farm. Boxer's split hoof was a long time in healing. They had started the rebuilding of the windmill the day after the victory of the day after the victory celebrations were ended. Boxer refused to take even a day off of work, and made it a point of honor not to let it be seen that he was in pain. In the evenings, he would admit privately to Clover that the hoof troubled him a great deal. We've talked about the word hoof before, but just to refresh your memory, let's take a look at a hoof. So some animals have this type of foot, and this is a hoof. So if Boxer has a split hoof, that means it's damaged and it hurts him. He would admit privately to Clover that the hoof troubled him a great deal. Clover treated the hoof with poultices of herbs, which she spread by chewing them, and both she and Benjamin urged Boxer to work less hard. A horse's lungs do not last forever, she said to him, but Boxer would not listen. He had, he said, only one real ambition left, to see the windmill well under way before he reached the age of retirement. When something is underway, that means that it is in progress. So Boxer wanted to see the windmill in progress before he reached the age of retirement. At the beginning, when the laws of Animal Farm were first formulated, the retiring age had been fixed for horses and pigs at 12, for cows at 14, for dogs at 9, for sheep at 7, and for hens and geese at 5. Liberal old age pensions had been agreed upon, and yet no animal had actually retired on pension, but of late the subject had been discussed more and more. Now that the small field beyond the orchard had been set aside for barley, it was rumored that a corner of the large pasture was to be fenced off and turned into a grazing ground for superannuated animals. For a horse, it was said, the pension would be 5 pounds of corn a day, and in winter 15 pounds of hay, with a carrot or possibly an apple on public holidays. Boxer's 12th birthday was due in late summer of the following year. Meanwhile, life was hard. The winter was as cold as the last one had been, and food was even shorter. Once again, all rations were reduced, except those of the pigs and the dogs, A too rigid equality in rations, Squealer explained, would have been contrary to the principles of animalism. In any case, he had no difficulty in proving to the other animals that they were not, in reality, short of food, whatever the appearance might be. For the time being, certainly, it had been found necessary to make a readjustment of rations. Squealer always spoke of it as a readjustment, never as a reduction. But in comparison with the days of Jones, the improvement was enormous. Reading out the figures in a shrill, rapid voice, he proved them in detail that they had more oats, more hay, more turnips than they had in Jones's day, that they had worked shorter hours, that their drinking water was of better quality, that they lived longer, that a larger proportion of their young ones survived infancy, and that they had more straw in their stalls, and suffered less from fleas. The animals believed every word of it. Truth to tell, Jones and all he stood for had almost faded out of their memories. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare. Harsh means unpleasantly tense. Unpleasantly intense. So if something is harsh, it's intense. If the sky is a harsh blue, it is an intense blue, but in an ugly way. If someone treats you harshly, they're treating you intensely, with intense emotions, but negative emotions. So what was harsh here? They knew that life nowadays was harsh. So a harsh life is an intense life. A lot of intense things, maybe intense emotions, intense situations, but sometimes intense could be good. This is always bad if it's harsh. So I imagine a lot of work, a lot of hard work, and a lot of intense emotions, negative ones. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare, and they were often hungry and often cold, and that they were usually working when they were not asleep. But doubtless it had been worse in the old days. They were glad to believe so. Besides, in those days they had been slaves, and now they were free, and that made all the difference, as Squealer did not fail to point out. To point something out is to highlight something, to emphasize something. There were many more months to feed now. In the autumn, the 4 sows had all littered about simultaneously. Sows are pigs, I think maybe female pigs, producing 31 young pigs between them. The young pigs were piebald. What does that mean, piebald? I have no idea. That's a funny word, piebald. Piebald, of a horse having irregular patches of 2 colors, typically black and white. Well, so that's horse vocabulary. I guess my dog, I have a dog, a black and white dog. I think he's piebald. So piebald is, yeah, you see here, my dog looks like this dog here with the uneven black and white spots. There's a piebald bird. Heesuk Joan from Korea says hello. Hello, Heesuk. How are you doing today? Okay, so we get the word piebald. The young pigs were piebald. And as Napoleon was the only boar on the farm, it was possible to guess at their parentage. It was announced that later, when bricks and timber had been purchased, a schoolroom would be built in the farmhouse garden. For the time being, The young pigs were given their instruction by Napoleon himself in the farm kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden and were discouraged from playing with the other young animals. At about this time, too, it was laid down as a rule that when a pig and any other animal met on the path, the other animal must stand aside, and also that all pigs, of whatever degree, were to have the privilege of wearing green ribbons on their tails on Sundays. The farm had had a fairly successful year, but was still short of money. There were the bricks, sand, and lime for the schoolroom to be purchased, and it would also be necessary to begin saving up again for the machinery for the windmill. Then there were the lamp oil and candles for the house, sugar for Napoleon's own table. He forbade this to the other pigs on the grounds that it made them fat. And all the usual replacements such as tools, nails, string, coal, wire, scrap iron, and dog biscuits. A stump of hay and part of a potato crop were sold off, and the contract for eggs was increased to 600 a week, so that year the hens barely hatched enough chicks to keep their numbers at the same level. Rations were reduced in December, were reduced again in February, and lanterns in the stall were forbidden to save oil. But the pigs seemed comfortable enough, and in fact were putting on weight, if anything. One afternoon in late February, a warm, rich, appetizing scent, such as the animals had never smelt before, wafted itself across the yard. Wafting is like this movement. Ooh, this is wafting. So the wonderful smell of food wafted through the air. Wafted itself across the courtyard from the little brew house which had been discussed in Jones's time, and which stood beyond the kitchen. Some said it was the smell of cooking barley. The animals sniffed the air hungrily and wondered whether a warm mash was being prepared for their supper. But no warm mash appeared, and on the following Sunday it was announced that from now onwards all barley would be reserved for the pigs. A field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news soon leaked out that every pig was now receiving a ration of a pint of beer daily. The word leak is an interesting word. Let's take a look at, you probably know it, but just in case you don't. A leak is something like this. That's not exactly a leak. Let's try something else. Oh, here's a good picture of a leak. All these leaks in the pictures are big, but they can be very small too. They don't have to be big. Let's see if we can find a small leak. This is a small leak. So just a little something escaping is a leak. It's usually talked about with water and plumbing and pipes. That's a leak. But it can also be used when a secret escapes from a group of people, or usually from a group of people. So if a group of people have a secret and somehow little parts of the secret or all of the secret escape from the group, this is a leak. And we had that word here somewhere. Where did it go? It was announced that from now onwards all barley would be reserved for the pigs. The field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news soon leaked out that every pig was now receiving a ration of a pint of beer daily. So all the pigs were drinking beer every day, not the other animals. They weren't allowed to do that. But the news leaked out. So the pigs had a little secret, but somehow the secret escaped from them. And the news soon leaked out that every pig was now receiving a ration of a pint of beer daily, with half a gallon for Napoleon himself, which was always served to him in the Crown Derby soup tureen. But if there were hardships to be borne, they were partly offset by the fact that life nowadays had a greater dignity than it had before. There were more songs, more speeches, more processions. Napoleon had commanded that once a week there should be held something called a spontaneous demonstration. Well, that's funny because spontaneous means not planned. But this is a planned demonstration that they're calling a spontaneous demonstration, the object of which was to celebrate the struggles and triumphs of Animal Farm. At the appointed time, the animals would leave their work and march round the precincts of the farm. Precinct is like a word for district or area, different area. It's very similar to the word district. And march round the precincts of the farm in military formation, with the pigs leading, then the horses, then the cows, then the sheep, then the poultry. The dogs flanked the procession. To flank means to be on the side. So you have this parade of animals marching around the farm, and the dogs were always on the side, guarding everyone, keeping everyone safe. The dogs flanked the procession, and at the head of all marched Napoleon's black cockerel. Boxer and Clover always carried between them a green banner, marked with the hoof and horn of, and the caption, "Long live Comrade Napoleon." Afterwards, there were recitations of poems composed in Napoleon's honor, and a speech by Squealer giving the particulars of the latest increases in production and foodstuffs, and on occasion a shot was fired with the gun. The sheep were the greatest devotees of the spontaneous demonstration, and if anyone complained, as a few animals sometimes did when no pigs or no dogs were near, that they wasted time and meant a lot of standing about in the cold. Cammy Cat says hello. Hello, Cammy Cat. Thank you for joining us today. That they wasted time and meant a lot of standing about in the cold. The sheep were sure to silence him in a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Amir is asking, how is recite different from recitation? Recite is a verb, so I can say, Amir recites the poem, which means usually when you're reciting something, it's because you remember it. You don't have to remember it, but usually when you use the word recite, it means you say it from memory. So if I say, Amir recites the poem, that's recite as an action. But recitation is a noun. It's the noun form. So, well, actually, let's just write it down for a moment. It's easier if you can look at it. Let me find my text. So let's see. Amir recites a poem. Okay. In this sentence, the action is recite. It's like saying from memory or giving from memory, something like that. And recitation is a noun. It's a noun form of the same thing. Amir gives a recitation. Whoops. Let's see if it's a little bit hard to see because of all the text. Let's move it over here. So in the first sentence, Amir recites a poem. The action is recite. But in the second sentence, the action is give. What are you giving? You're giving a thing. That thing is a recitation. So it's just the thing form, the concept form of recite. The sheep were the greatest devotees of the spontaneous demonstration, and if anyone complained, as a few animals sometimes did, when no pigs or dogs were near, that they wasted time and sorry, I got a little bit lost. Let's try that again. That they wasted time and meant a lot of standing about in the cold. So the other animals were saying, we hate this stupid spontaneous demonstration. It wastes time and we're uncomfortable. The sheep were sure to silence them with a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But by and large, the animals enjoyed these celebrations. They found it comforting to be reminded that, after all, they were truly their own masters, and the work they did was for their own benefit. So that, with the songs, the processions, squealers, lists of gestures, the thunder of the gun, the crowing of the cockerel, the fluttering of the flag, they were able to forget that their bellies were empty, at least part of the time. In April, Animal Farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously. On the day it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered which revealed further details about Snowball's complicity with Jones. Amir says, is it just one group who recites? Or is it just one person who recites? What is the word used for a group? It would be also recite. So if you have a group together, for example, the best example would be in church. Everyone says a prayer together. That is reciting a prayer. It doesn't matter if it's one person or a million people. If you're saying it together in the same way, it's reciting. So it doesn't have anything to do with one person or many people. Now I'm curious, because I don't think that recite means to say from memory, but that's how I define it. But let's just see. Recite meaning. Let's see. To repeat out loud. Yeah. Well, actually it says from memory before an audience. Yeah, so I guess that there is an element of memorization. But you could read something. I think you could be reading it and reciting it at the same time. In April, the farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously. On the same day, it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered, which revealed further details about Snowball's complicity with Jones. It now appeared that Snowball had not, as the animals had previously imagined, merely attempted to lose the battle of the cowshed by means of stratagem, but had been openly fighting on Jones's side. In fact, It was he who had actually been the leader of the human forces and had charged into battle with the words "Long live humanity" on his lips. The wounds on Snowball's back, which a few of the animals still remembered to have seen, had been inflicted by Napoleon's teeth. In the middle of the summer, Moses, the raven, suddenly reappeared on the farm after an absence of several years. He was quite unchanged, still did no work, and talked in the same strain as ever about Sugar Candy Mountain. He would perch on a stump, flap his black wings, and talk by the hour to anyone who would listen. "Up there, comrades," he would say solemnly, pointing to the sky with his large beak. "Up there, just on the other side of that dark cloud, you can see, there it lies, Sugar Candy Mountain, that happy country where we poor animals shall rest forever from our labors." He even claimed to have been there on one of the higher flights, and to have seen the everlasting fields of clover and the linseed cake and the lump sugar growing on the hedges. Many of the animals believed him. Their lives now, they reasoned, were hungry and laborious. Was it not right and just that a better world should exist somewhere else? A thing that was difficult to determine was the attitude of the pigs towards Moses. They all declared contemptuously. That word contempt always means hate or anger. So if they say something, declare something contemptuously, it means that they're feeling some kind of hatred or anger towards Moses. Let's see, what did they say contemptuously? His stories about Sugar Candy Mountain were lies. So the pigs are saying, he's stupid, those stupid stories about Sugar Candy Mountain. They're saying it with contempt, with hate. And yet they allowed him to remain on the farm, not working, with an allowance of a gill of beer a day. After his hoof had healed up, Boxer worked harder than ever. Indeed, all the animals worked like slaves that year. Apart from the regular work of the farm and the rebuilding of the windmill, there was a schoolhouse for the young pigs, which was started in March. Sometimes the long hours on insufficient food were hard to bear, but Boxer never faltered. To falter means to hesitate. In nothing that he said or did was there any sign that his strength was not what it had been. It was only his appearance that was a little altered. His hide was less shiny. Hide is the skin of an animal. So his skin wasn't so shiny anymore. And maybe that includes the hair. I think they're talking about the hair, not the actual skin. But when I see the word hide, I think of animal skin because I always think of it. I always picture something like this. This is animal hide. It's the hide of a cow, I guess. So I think it's more about the skin than it is about the fur. The fur is called fur. Animal hair is called fur. And when the emphasis is on the hair, you call it fur. But I think when the emphasis is on the skin part, you would call it hide. His hide was less shiny than it had used to be, and his great haunches seemed to have shrunken. The others said, "Boxer will pick up when the spring grass comes." But the spring grass came, and Boxer grew no fatter. Sometimes on the slope leading to the top of the quarry, when he braced his muscles against the weight of some vast boulder, it seemed that nothing kept him on his feet except the will to continue, and at such times his lips were seen to form the words, "I will work harder." He had no voice left. Once again, Clover and Benjamin warned him to take care of his health, but Boxer paid no attention. His 12th birthday was approaching. He did not care what happened, so long as a good store of stone was accumulated before he went on pension. Late one evening in the summer, a sudden rumor ran around the farm that something had happened to Boxer. He had gone out alone to drag a load of stone down to the windmill, and sure enough, the rumor was true. A few minutes later, 2 pigeons came racing in with the news. "Boxer has fallen. He's lying on his side and can't get up." About half the animals on the farm rushed out to the knoll where the windmill stood. There lay Boxer, between the shafts of the cart, his neck stretched out, unable to raise his head. His eyes were glazed, his sides matted with sweat. A thin stream of blood had trickled out of his mouth. Clover dropped to her knees at his side. "Boxer," she cried, "how are you?" "It's my lungs," said Boxer in a weak voice. "It does not matter. I think you'll be able to finish the windmill without me. There's a pretty good store of stone accumulated. I had only another month to go in any case. To tell you the truth, I'd been looking forward to my retirement. And perhaps as Benjamin is growing old too, they will let him retire at the same time and be a companion to me." "We must get help at once," said Clover. "Run, somebody, and tell Squealer what's happened." All the other animals immediately raced back to the farmhouse to give Squealer the news. Only Clover remained, and Benjamin, who lay down at Boxer's side, and without speaking kept the flies off of him. His long tail, about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared. Wait a minute. With his long tail, sorry. After about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared, full of sympathy and concern. He said that Comrade Napoleon had learned with the very deepest distress of this misfortune to one of the most loyal workers on the farm, and was already making arrangements to send Boxer to be treated in the hospital at Wellington. The animals felt a little uneasy at this, except for Molly and Snowball. No other animal had ever left the farm, and they did not like to think of their sick comrade in the hands of human beings. However, Squealer easily convinced them that the veterinary surgeon in Wellington could treat Boxer's case most satisfactorily than could be done on the farm. And about half an hour later, when Boxer had somewhat recovered, he was with difficulty got on his feet and managed to limp back to his stall, where Clover and Benjamin had prepared a good bed of straw for him. For the next 2 days, Boxer remained in his stall. The pigs had sent out a large bottle of pink medicine, which they had found in the medicine chest in the bathroom, and Clover administered it to Boxer twice a day after meals. In the evenings, she lay in his stall and talked to him, while Benjamin kept the flies off of him. Boxer professed not to be sorry for what had happened. If he had made a good recovery, he might expect to live another 3 years, and he looked forward to the peaceful days that he would spend in the corner of the big pasture. It would be the first time that he had leisure to study and improve his mind. He intended, he said, to devote the rest of his life to learning the remaining 22 letters of the alphabet. However, Benjamin and Clover could only be with Boxer after working hours, and it was in the middle of the day when the van came to take him away. The animals were all at work, weeding turnips under the supervision of a pig, when they were astonished to see Benjamin come galloping from the direction of the farm buildings, braying at the top of his voice. It was the first time that they had ever seen Benjamin excited. Indeed, it was the first time that anyone had ever seen him gallop. "Quick, quick," he shouted. "Come at once. They're taking Boxer away." Without waiting for orders from the pig, the animals broke off work and raced back to the farm buildings. Sure enough, there in the yard, with a large closed van drawn by 2 horses with lettering on its side, and a sly-looking man in a low-crowned bowler hat sitting at the driver's seat, and Boxer's stall was empty. Sly. Sly means sneaky, but I'm not sure if you would know sneaky. Let's see what kind of pictures we get with sly. Oh, unfortunately, no good pictures of sly. Sly person. Let's see. Let's look at these pictures of sly. See, these people look like they have a secret plan, like they're going to do something bad. These are sly people planning something bad. The animals crowded round the van. "Goodbye, Boxer," they chorused. "Goodbye." "Fools! Fools!" shouted Benjamin, prancing round them and stamping the earth with his small hoofs. "Fools! Do you not see what is written on the side of the van?" That gave the animals pause, and there was a hush. Muriel began to spell out the words, but Benjamin pushed her aside in the midst of the deadly silence as he read, "Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler, Willingdon." I remember when I was a kid, a long time ago, they used to play old cartoons on the TV. Because, now horses are not a very common thing. They were much more common. I mean, imagine if it's the 1970s and I'm watching cartoons from the 40s or 50s, horses were much more common back then. And I always remember that when it was kind of a joke that when a horse was ready to die, they would sell them to the glue factory. So I don't know about now, probably not. But in the past, I guess they used to use dead horses to make glue. So I understand that reference now. I mean, I understand that reference here. I'm not sure if you understand that. That's why I'm explaining it. Amir is saying, I meant recital and recitation. Sorry. Amir, if you're referring to a group, it still is not about a group. Reciting is a verb. It's an action. It's an action. They recite a poem. He recites a poem. See, it could be for one person or many. He gives a recitation. They give a recitation. It still doesn't matter if it's a group. It just matters that recite is an action in one form, and recitation is the idea of reciting in another. And it doesn't matter if it's one person or two people or a million. All right, so they are not sending Boxer to the doctor. They're sending him to the glue factory. They sold him to make money. A cry of horror burst from the animals. At this moment, the man on the box whipped up his horses, and the van moved out of the yard in a smart trot. All the animals followed, crying out at the tops of their lungs. Clover forced his way to the front. The van began to gather speed. Clover tried to stir her stout limbs to a gallop and achieved a canter. "Boxer!" she cried. "Boxer! Boxer! Boxer!" And just at this moment, as though he had heard the uproar outside, Boxer's face, with the white stripe down his nose, appeared at the small window at the back of the van. "Boxer!" cried Clover in a terrible voice. "Boxer, get out quickly! They're taking you to your death!" All the animals took up the cry of "Get out, Boxer, get out!" But the van was already gathering speed and drawing away from them. It was uncertain whether Boxer had understood what Clover had said, but a moment later his face disappeared from the window, and there was the sound of a tremendous drumming of hooves inside the van. He was trying to kick his way out. The time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hoofs would have smashed the van to matchwood, but alas, his strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hoofs grew fainter and died away. So Boxer was trying to get out, trying to escape, and the author is saying when he was younger, just a few times would have completely destroyed the van, and he would have been able to escape. But now he's old and very weak, so eventually you just stop hearing the kicking. In desperation, the animals began appealing to the two horses, which drew the van to stop. "Comrades, comrades," they shouted, "don't take your own brother to his death." But the stupid brutes, too ignorant to realize what was happening, merely set back their ears and quickened their pace. Boxer's face did not appear at the window. Too late, someone thought of racing ahead and shutting the 5-barred gate. But in another moment, the van was through it and rapidly disappearing down the road. Boxer was never seen again. 3 days later, it was announced that he had died in the hospital at Willingdon, in spite of receiving every attention a horse could have. Squealer came to announce the news to the others. He had, he said, been present at Boxer's last hours. "It was the most affecting sight I have ever seen," said Squealer, lifting his trotter and wiping away a tear. "I was at his bedside at the very last. And at the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear that his sole sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. 'Forward, comrades,' he whispered, 'forward in the name of the rebellion. Long live Animal Farm, long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right.' Those were his very last words, comrades." It had come to his knowledge, he said, that a foolish and wicked rumor had been circulated at the time of Boxer's removal. Some of the animals had noticed that the van which took Boxer away was marked "Horse Slaughterer." To slaughter is to kill something with a knife or something sharp. So, slaughtering an animal is killing an animal with a knife. So, a horse slaughterer is a business that kills horses. Maybe old horses or sick horses. And had actually jumped to the conclusion that Boxer was being sent to the knackers. It was almost unbelievable, said Squealer, that any animal could be so stupid. Surely, he cried indignantly, whisking his tail and skipping from side to side, surely they knew their beloved leader, Comrade Napoleon, better than that. But the explanation was really very simple. The van had previously been the property of the knacker and had been bought by the veterinary surgeon, who had not yet painted the old name out. That was how the mistake had arisen. The animals were enormously relieved to hear this, and when Squealer went on to give further graphic details of Boxer's deathbed, the admirable care he had received, and the expensive medicines for which Napoleon had paid without a thought as to the cost, their last doubts disappeared, and the sorrow that they had felt for their comrade's death was tempered by the thought that at least he had died happy. Napoleon himself appeared at the meeting on the following Sunday morning and pronounced a short oration in Boxer's honor. It had not been possible, he said, to bring back their lamented comrade's remains for interment on the farm, but he had ordered a large wreath to be made from the laurels in the farmhouse garden and sent down to be placed on Boxer's grave. And in a few days' time, the pigs intended to hold a memorial banquet in Boxer's honor. Napoleon ended his speech with a reminder of Boxer's two favorite maxims: "I will work harder," and "Comrade Napoleon is always right." Maxims, he said, which every animal would do well to adopt as his own. On the day appointed for the banquet, the grocer's van drove up from Willingdon and delivered a large wooden crate at the farmhouse. That night there was the sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by what sounded like Sorry, I was reading a comment and I lost my place. Wait, let me finish. Which was followed by what sounded like a violent quarrel. Amir is asking, does maxim mean commandment? Well, my understanding of maxim is it's just a saying, something that someone said that makes a lot of sense. But let's see what the definition is here. Yeah, so a maxim is like something that seems true or makes sense or helps you get through your life, survive through your life, because it reminds you of what the truth is. The official definition of a maxim is a short, pithy statement expressing a general truth or rule of conduct. Let's look at some examples of a maxim. I don't agree with these. So, for example, the bigger the better, I guess, according to Google, is considered a maxim. You see, that's not a commandment, but it's like a rule that is usually true, or some people believe is usually true. The bigger, the better. Or here's another one: good things come in small packages. So these are actually these actually contradict each other. Or birds of a feather flock together. So which means people who think the same way tend to form groups and stay in those groups. So they're not commandments, but they're rules. They're rules that make sense, that you can repeat, that help you understand how things are. So in this world of the Animal Farm, the maxims, what was it, Snowball? Now I'm forgetting names. No, Boxer. Boxer's maxims were, I will, what was it? I will work harder. I will work harder. So these are the rules that he lives by that make sense to him. Always work harder. That's one. And the other one is Comrade Napoleon is always right. So if he's having trouble making sense of the world, he returns to these two ideas, work harder and Comrade Napoleon is always right. Because he's always repeating those same phrases, they're called maxims. But they're not commandments. On the day appointed for the banquet, a grocer's van drove up from Wellington and delivered a large wooden crate at the farmhouse. That night, there was the sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by what sounded like a violent quarrel. A quarrel is a fight, and ended about 11 o'clock with a tremendous crash of glass. No one stirred in the farmhouse before noon on the following day, and the word went round that from somewhere or other the pigs had acquired the money to buy themselves another case of whiskey. Okay, so that was chapter 9. We're finished with chapter 9. And we just have one chapter left, which is chapter 10. And we're going to read that now. How exciting to finally finish this book. But before we do that, I'm going to take a 1-minute break. So I will return in 1 minute. Please don't go anywhere. Okay, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. All right, Amir says, can you read Great Gatsby after this one? I suppose I could. I've tried to watch that movie several times. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. It seemed kind of boring. I guess it was supposed to be an important movie, but I didn't understand it. I was thinking about reading Dracula next, but only not really because I'm interested in the story. It's just that it's one of the more popular audiobooks. So I thought that probably a lot of people would be interested in that book. But I don't know. Well, let me think about it. I guess I better think about it quickly since we're almost done. Okay. So let's do the final chapter of Animal Farm by George Orwell. Chapter 10. Years passed. The seasons came and went. The short animal lives fled by. A time came when there was no one who remembered the old days before the rebellion, except Clover, Benjamin, Moses the raven, and a number of pigs. Muriel was dead. Bluebell, Jessie, and Pincher were dead. Jones, too, was dead. He had died in an inebriate's home in another part of the country. Inebriation is another way of saying being drunk. So an inebriate, I guess, is a more polite way of saying someone is a drunk. So Jones, the farmer, died in like a hospital that takes care of people with, I guess, an alcohol addiction. Snowball was forgotten. Boxer was forgotten, except by a few who had known him. Clover was an old stout mare now, stiff in the joints, and with a tendency to rheumy eyes. She was 2 years past the retiring age, but in fact no animal had ever actually retired. The talk of setting aside a corner of the pasture for superannuated animals had long since been dropped. Napoleon was now a mature boar of 24 stone. So a stone, I think, is like 14 pounds. Wait, how many pounds? I keep forgetting. How many pounds in a stone? 14. So Napoleon, how many stone was he? 24 stone. That's 336 pounds, which, let's see what that is in kilograms. That's 152 kilograms, so that's pretty fat. Okay, so Napoleon was now a mature boar of 24 stone. Squealer was so fat that he could with difficulty see out of his eyes. Only Benjamin was much the same as ever, except for being a little grayer around the muzzle. Remember, the muzzle is this part of an animal, the mouth nose part of the animal. Only Benjamin was much the same as ever, except for being a little grayer about the muzzle, and since Boxer's death, more morose and taciturn than ever. Morose, I think, means sad, but let's just check that out. Morose. Like melancholy, sullen, ill-tempered, in a bad mood. So being morose means being in a very bad mood. And taciturn. Reserved or uncommunicative in speech, saying very little. So who was this? This was Benjamin was morose. He seemed like he was always in a bad mood, and taciturn, so he didn't really talk very much after Boxer died. There were many creatures on the farm now, though the increase was not so great as had been expected in earlier years. Many animals had been born to whom the rebellion was only a dim tradition, passed on by word of mouth, and others had been bought who had never heard mention of such a thing before their arrival. The farm possessed 3 horses now besides Clover. They were fine, upstanding beasts, willing workers and good comrades, but very stupid. None of them proved able to learn the alphabet beyond the letter B. They accepted everything that they were told about the rebellion and the principles of animalism, especially from Clover, for whom they had an almost filial respect. That word "feel" means like brother. So filial means, well, let me just check that. Filial. Denoting the generation. Okay, not brother, but son. So, of or due from a son or daughter. So, daughter or son. Well, that's how you say son or daughter in French. Fille or fille. So, that makes sense. I don't know why I thought it was brother. I'm not sure why. Anyway, it's son. Let's see. So they had a filial respect for Clover, which doesn't make sense. Maybe what that means is they thought of him like a father or a mother. I don't know if Clover is a boy or a girl, but it was doubtful whether they understood very much of it. The farm was more prosperous now and better organized. It had been enlarged by 2 fields which had been bought from Mr. Pilkington. The windmill had been successfully completed at last, and the farm possessed a threshing machine and a hay elevator of its own, and various new buildings had been added to it. Whymper had bought himself a dog-cart. The windmill, however, had not, after all, been used for generating electric power. It was used for milling corn, and brought in a handsome money profit. The animals were hard at work, building yet another windmill. When that one was finished, so it was said, the dynamos would be installed. But the luxuries of which Snowball had once taught the animals to dream, the stalls with electric light, the hot and cold water, the 3-day week, were no longer talked about. Napoleon had denounced such ideas as contrary to the spirit of animalism. The truest happiness, he said, lay in working hard and living frugally. To be frugal means to be very careful with your resources or with your money. So a frugal person is someone who is very careful with money or with resources. Somehow, it seemed as though the farm had grown richer without making the animals themselves any richer, except, of course, for the pigs and the dogs. Perhaps this was partly because there were so many pigs and so many dogs. It was not that these creatures did not work after their fashion. There was, as Squealer was never tired of explaining, endless work in the supervision and organization of the farm. Much of this work was of a kind that the other animals were too ignorant to understand. For example, Squealer told them that the pigs had to expend enormous labors every day upon mysterious things called files, reports, minutes, and memoranda. These were the large sheets of paper which had to be closely covered with writing, and as soon as they were so covered, they were burnt in the furnace. This was the highest importance for the welfare of the farm. Hadi says filial blood relation can, yeah, filial. I mean, it says from a affection or respect or feelings of or due to a son or daughter, something that is owed to a son or daughter, denoting the generation of generations after parental generation. Because in Latin the word filius or filia means son or daughter. And you can still see that word in French. Fille means daughter in French, and fille means son in French. So you can see that connection of children. But I guess it does have some kind of connection with generations also. Hadith says frugal, spendthrift. They're kind of opposites. Frugal means you're very careful with money, but a spendthrift is someone who is very irresponsible with money. So they're really kind of opposites. These were the large sheets of paper which had to be closely covered with writing, and as soon as they were so covered, they were burnt in the furnace. This was of the highest importance for the welfare of the farm, Squealer said, but still neither the pigs nor the dogs produced any food by their own labor, and there were very many of them, and their appetites were always good. As for the others, their life, so far as they knew, was as it had always been. They were generally hungry, they slept on straw, they drank from the pool, they labored in the fields. In winter they were troubled by the cold, in summer by the flies. Sometimes the older ones among them racked their dim memories and tried to determine whether in earlier days of the rebellion, when Jones's expulsion was still recent, things had ever been better or worse than now. They could not remember. There was nothing with which they could compare their present lives. They had nothing to go upon except Squealer's lists of figures, which invariably demonstrated that everything was getting better and better. The animals found the problem insoluble. In any case, they had little time for speculating on such things now. Only old Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life, and to know the things that never had been, or ever could be much better or much worse. Hunger, hardship, and disappointment being, so he said, the unalterable law of life. And yet, the animals never gave up hope. More, they never lost, even for an instant, their sense of honor and privilege in being members of the animal farm. They were still the only animals in the whole county, in all England, owned and operated by animals. Not one of them, not even the youngest, not even the newcomers who had been brought from farms 10 or 20 miles away, ever ceased to marvel. To marvel is, oh, wow, that's marveling. To marvel at that. And when they had heard the gun booming and saw the green flag fluttering at the masthead, their hearts swelled with imperishable pride, and the talk turned always towards the heroic days of the expulsion of Jones, the writing of the 7 Commandments, the great battles in which the human invaders had been defeated. None of the old dreams had been abandoned. The republic of the animals, which Major had foretold, when the green fields of England should be untrodden by human feet, was still believed in. Some day it was coming. It might not be soon. It might not be within the lifetime of any animal now living, but still it was coming. Even the tune of the beasts of England was perhaps hummed secretly here and there. Hassan says prodigal, spendthrift. I think they're similar. Wait, let's see. Prodigal. So spendthrift is a person who spends money in an extravagant, irresponsible way. Now let's look at prodigal. Because I think prodigal maybe just means irresponsible, but let's see. Spending money having or giving something in a lavish scale. Yeah, I guess they are synonyms. Prodigal and spendthrift. Neither of them are extremely common words, but I guess you probably would hear spendthrift more than you would hear prodigal. The Beasts of England was perhaps hummed secretly here and there. At any rate, it was a fact that every animal on the farm knew it, though no one had ever dared to sing it aloud. It might be that their lives were hard, and that not all of their hopes had been fulfilled, but they were conscious that they were not as other animals. If they went hungry, it was not from feeding tyrannical human beings. If they worked hard, at least, they worked for themselves. No creature among them went upon 2 legs. No creature called any other creature master. All animals were equal. One day, in the early summer, Squealer ordered the sheep to follow him, led them out to a piece of waste ground at the other end of the farm, which had become overgrown with birch saplings. Saplings are baby trees. And birch is a type of tree. The sheep spent the whole day there browsing at the leaves under Squealer's supervision. In the evening he returned to the farmhouse himself, but as it was warm weather, told the sheep to stay where they were. It ended by their remaining there for a whole week, during which time the other animals saw nothing of them. Squealer was with them for the greater part of every day. He said, teaching them to sing a new song for which privacy was needed. It was just after the sheep had returned, on a pleasant evening when the animals had finished work and were making their way back to the farm buildings, that the terrified neighing is when a horse goes, eh, that's neighing. The terrified neighing of a horse sounded from a yard. Startled, the animals stopped in their tracks. It was Clover's voice. She neighed again, and all the animals broke into a gallop and rushed into the yard. Then they saw what Clover had seen. It was a pig walking on his hind legs. So remember that word hind means in the back. Just like in the word behind. That means back. And let's just look at a video. So an animal walking on hind legs. This is a dog. Here's a picture of a dog walking on his hind legs. I think, let's see, do they show any other kind of animal or just dogs? These are dogs walking on their hind legs. They don't really show anything else besides that. Well, here's a monkey walking on his hind legs. Oh, it didn't show up. Oh well, you get the idea. I hope. It was a pig walking on his hind legs. Yes, it was Squealer. A little awkwardly, as though not quite used to supporting his considerable bulk. Bulk means big or fat. But with perfect balance, he was strolling across the yard. And a moment later, out from the door of the farmhouse came a long file of pigs, all walking on their hind legs. Some did it better than others. One or two were even a trifle unsteady and looked as though they would have liked the support of a stick. But every one of them made his way right round the yard successfully, and finally there was a tremendous baying of dogs and a shrill crowing from the black cockerel, and out came Napoleon himself, majestically upright, casting haughty glances from side to side, with the dogs gambolling round him. He carried a whip in his trotter. There was a deadly silence. Amazed, terrified, huddling together, the animals watched the long line of pigs march slowly round the yard. It was as though the world had turned upside down, and there came a moment when the first shock had worn off, and when, in spite of everything, in spite of their terror of the dogs and of the habit developed through long years of never complaining, never criticizing, no matter what happened, they might have uttered some word of protest, but just at that moment, as though at a signal, all the sheep burst out into a tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better, 4 legs good, 2 legs better. Hadi says, trembling like an aspen, meaning of this expression. I don't know what an aspen is. I know it's a little town in Colorado, but I guess it's an animal. Let's see. Are you sure it's Aspen? I mean, when I hear the word Aspen, I think of this mountain town in Colorado. That's the only way that I know this word. But let's see if it has a meaning. Let's see. Aspen. Temporary cessation. Oh, that's apnea. It would help if I could type. Let's try aspen. A poplar tree. Well, aspen is a type of tree. And typically, let's see, a poplar tree with rounded long stalk, typically coarsely toothed leaves that tremble in the slight breeze. I've never heard that expression, trembling like an aspen. Let's see. Well, I guess it's just a way of putting a picture in your head. I wonder if we can find a picture of that. Trembling aspen. GIF. I think it's probably just a way of putting a picture in your head of, yeah, I mean, this doesn't really look like, it just looks like any other tree, so I don't know why they say aspen, but trembling is just a shaking movement, a very small shaking movement. This is trembling. My hands are trembling. So I guess it's just a way of putting a picture in your head that something is moving that way. Hadi is saying, what is the difference between walking in a file? File means line. So if you're walking in a file, you're walking in a line. But abreast means like in the front. Better check that. Nobody says walking abreast, but let's first just look at what the word abreast means. Side by side, facing the same way, alongside. Oh, so actually it means walking side by side. So a file, let's see. Single file line. A file I would picture like this. This is a line as a file. Your typical line. So this is walking in a line in a file. But abreast would, because, you know, this is your breast here. So if people are standing abreast of you, it would be on this side or this side. So let's see. Walking abreast. So then you picture something more like this. So I guess technically it's a line, but it's not your typical line. It's not the line that you normally expect. Oh boy, hold on. What am I doing? Wait a minute, let me... Here we go. All right. It went on for 5 minutes without stopping, and by the time the sheep had quieted down, the chance to utter any protest had passed, for the pigs had marched back into the farmhouse. Benjamin felt a nose nuzzling his shoulder. So we've talked about the word muzzle, and what was the other word that we used? Muzzle and... Oh my, I forgot the other word that we used. But, that word nuzzle comes from nose. Nose, nuzzle. Nuzzling is when you do this with your nose. This is nuzzling. So Benjamin felt a nose nuzzling his shoulder. He looked round. It was Clover. Oh, Amir says snout. That's good. You remember that. I forgot. You've got a good memory. And Cammy Cat says sly pigs. The pigs they have a plan. They're doing something. They're very sly. But yes, you're right, Amir. The other word was snout. You have a much better memory than me. But that word nuzzle comes from nose. And it's if you do this with your nose, that's nuzzling. Benjamin felt a nose nuzzling at his shoulder. He looked round. It was Clover. His old eyes looked dimmer than ever. So dimmer is when there's very low light. So his eyes looked dim. Means there was no light in his eyes. Like maybe the life was leaving his body. Because he's old. Without saying anything, she tugged gently at his mane and led him round to the end of the big barn, where the 7 commandments were written. For a minute or two they stood gazing at the tatted wall with its white lettering. "My sight is failing," she said finally. "Even when I was young I could not have read what was written there, but it appears to me that the wall looks different. Are the 7 commandments the same as they used to be, Benjamin?" For once Benjamin consented to break his rule, and he read out to her what was written on the wall. There was nothing there now except one single commandment. It ran, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." After that, it did not seem strange when the next day the pigs, who were supervising the work of the farm, all carried whips in their trotters. It did not seem strange to learn that the pigs had bought themselves a wireless set, were arranging to install a telephone, and had taken out subscriptions to John Bull, Titbits, and Daily Mirror. It did not seem strange when Napoleon was seen strolling in the farmhouse garden. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. In the farmhouse garden, with a pipe in his mouth. No, not even the pigs took Mr. Jones's clothes out of the wardrobes and put them on. Napoleon himself appearing in a black coat, rat-catcher breeches, and long leather leggings, while his favorite sow appeared in the watered silk dress Mrs. Jones had been used to wearing on Sundays. A week later, in the afternoon, a number of dog carts drove up to the farm. A deputation of neighboring farmers had been invited to make a tour of inspection. They were shown all over the farm and expressed a great admiration for everything they saw, especially the windmill. The animals were weeding the turnip field. They worked diligently, hardly raising their faces from the ground, and not knowing whether to be more frightened of the pigs or the human visitors. Huddy says, how do you pronounce awry? Awry. So, let me write it. And so the spelling looks very difficult, but the way that you pronounce it is just like this. Awry. 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 And when something goes awry, that means it goes crazy. It's in chaos. Or it goes wrong. Something went awry. Yeah, it's more about being wrong. Something goes awry. Something goes wrong. That evening, the loud laughter and bursts of singing came from the farmhouse, and suddenly, at the sound of the mingled voices, the animals were stricken with curiosity. Strike means hit, so the animals were hit with curiosity. What could be happening in there now? Now that for the first time animals and human beings were meeting on terms of equality. With one accord, they began to creep as quietly as possible into the farmhouse garden. At the gate, they paused, half frightened to go on, but Clover led the way in. They tiptoed up to the house, and such animals as were tall enough peered through in at the dining room window. There, round the long table, sat half a dozen farmers and half a dozen more eminent pigs, Napoleon himself occupying the seat of honor at the head of the table. The pigs appeared completely at ease in their chairs. The company had been enjoying a game of cards and had broken off for the moment, evidently in order to drink a toast. A large jug was circulating, and the mugs were being refilled with beer. No one noticed the wondering faces of the animals that gazed through the window. Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood had stood up, his mug in hand. In a moment he said he would ask the present company to drink a toast. But before doing so, there were a few words that he felt it incumbent upon him to say. It was a source of great satisfaction to him, he said, that he was sure to all others present to feel that a long period of mistrust and misunderstanding had now come to an end. There had been a time, not that he or any of the present company had shared such sentiments, but there had been a time when the respected proprietors of Animal Farm had been regarded, he would not say with hostility, but perhaps with a certain measure of misgiving. Misgiving is like doubt. So he's saying, the humans never really hated the animals, they just had some doubts. Unfortunate incidents had occurred. Mistaken ideas had been current. It had been felt that the existence of a farm owned and operated by pigs was somehow abnormal and was liable to have an unsettling effect in the neighborhood. Too many farmers had assumed without a due inquiry that on such a farm a spirit of license and indiscipline would prevail. They had been nervous about the effects upon their own animals, or even upon their human employees, but all such doubts were now dispelled. Today he and his friends had visited Animal Farm and inspected every inch of it with their own eyes. And what did they find? Not only the most up-to-date methods, but a discipline and an orderliness which should be an example to all the farmers everywhere. He believed that he was right in saying that the lower animals on Animal Farm did more work and received less food than any animals in the county. Indeed, he and his fellow visitors today had observed many features which they intended to introduce on their own farms immediately. He would end his remarks, he said, by emphasizing once again the friendly feelings that subsisted and ought to subsist between Animal Farm and its neighbors, between pigs and human beings. There was not, and there need not be, any clash of interests whatever. Their struggles and their difficulties were one. Was not the labor problem the same everywhere? Here it became apparent that Mr. Pilkington was about to spring some carefully prepared witticism on the company, but for a moment he was too overcome by amusement to be able to utter it. After much choking, during which his various chins turned purple, he managed to get it out. "If you have your lower animals to contend with," he said, "we have our lower classes. This bon mot, that means good word in French, bon mot, which I think that just means like the right word. Oh, let's check it out. Like the right phrasing or the most accurate word. Well, Google doesn't really say. Let me ask ChatGPT. Good word. Yeah, it just means like the right word, the right thing to say, the most accurate description. Something like that. You probably shouldn't use it. This bon mot had set the room in an uproar, and Mr. Pilkington once again congratulated the pigs on the low rations, the long working hours, and the general absence of pampering, which he had observed on Animal Farm. Pampering means to give a lot of luxury, to spoil something. If you pamper something, you make sure it's very comfortable and feeling very happy. And now, he said finally, he would ask the company to rise to their feet and make certain that their glasses were full. "Gentlemen," concluded Mr. Pilkington, "gentlemen, I give you a toast to the prosperity of Animal Farm." There was an enthusiastic cheering and stamping of feet. Napoleon was so gratified that he left his place and came round to the table to clink his mug against Mr. Pilkington's. And this is a clink. It's that sound. That's clinking. That was a clink. To clink his mug against Mr. Pilkington's before emptying it. When the cheering had died down, Napoleon, who had remained on his feet, intimated he had a few words to say. Like all of Napoleon's speeches, it was short and to the point. He too was happy that the period of misunderstanding was at an end. For a long time there had been rumors circulated, he had reason to think, by some malignant enemy. When you see that word mal or malign in a word, that always means bad or evil. So an evil enemy, by some malignant enemy, that there was something subversive or even revolutionary in the outlook of himself and his colleagues. They had been credited with attempting to stir up rebellion among the animals on the neighboring farms. Nothing could be further from the truth. Their sole wish now, and in the past, was to live at peace in normal business relations with their neighbors. This farm, which he had the honor to control, he added, was a cooperative enterprise. The title deeds, which were in his own possession, were owned by the pigs jointly. He did not believe, he said, that any of the old suspicions still lingered, but certain changes had been made recently in the routine of the farm which should have the effect of promoting confidence still further. Hitherto, the animals on the farm had had a rather foolish custom of addressing one another as comrade. This was to be suppressed. There had also been a very strange custom, whose origin was unknown, of marching every Sunday morning past a boar's skull, which was nailed to a post in the garden. This, too, would be suppressed, and the skull had already been buried. His visitors might have observed, too, the green flag which flew at the masthead. If so, they would perhaps have noted that the white hoof and horn, which had previously been marked, had now been removed. It would be a plain green flag from now onwards. He had only one criticism, he said, to make of Mr. Pilkington's excellent and neighborly speech. Mr. Pilkington had referred throughout to the animal farm. He could not, of course, know, for he, Napoleon, was only now for the first time announcing it, that the name Animal Farm had been abolished. Henceforward, the farm would be known as the Manor Farm, which he believed was its correct original name. "Gentlemen," concluded Napoleon, "I will give you the same toast as before, but in a different form. Fill your glasses to the brim. Gentlemen, here is my toast to the prosperity of the Manor Farm." There was the same hearty cheering as before. The mugs were emptied to the dregs, but as the animals outside gazed at the scene, it seemed to them that some strange thing was happening. What was it that had altered the faces of the pigs? Clover's old dim eyes flitted from one face to another. Some of them had 5 chins, some had 4, some had 3. But what was it that seemed to be melting and changing? Then, the applause having come to an end, the company took up their cards and continued the game that had been interrupted, and the animals crept silently away. Amir says it's getting darker and darker. Amir, are you referring to the word dim, which they have used several times? That would be certainly understandable. So if you say something is getting darker and darker, you can say it's dimming. But I guess there's a difference between something getting darker and something losing its light. So that's why if you're talking about somebody's eyes being dim, you're not saying that they look black or dark. You're saying the light is leaving the eyes. So it sounds like they're dying or they're very weak or something like that. So they're kind of similar, getting darker and dim, but I think the emphasis is a little different, and so also the meaning. And now Miranda is saying, what is dreg? And dreg is solid pieces that sink to the bottom of some liquids, such as wine or coffee. So let's see. Let's see if we can find some pictures of dregs. Dreg is always used in a negative way. It means something left over or dirty. So here are the dregs. The dregs. It's not very nice. So if you're drinking wine, you very often have something like this at the bottom of your wine glass. These are the dregs, and it's not something that you really want to drink. It doesn't taste good. Amir says the way that they changed yes, it seems like the pigs have become the new masters to hate. So it's getting darker in that sense. The pigs are going dark. Okay, let's see. But what was it that seemed to be melting and changing? And then the applause having come to an end, the company took up their cards and continued the game that had been interrupted, and the animals crept away silently. But they had not gone 20 yards when they stopped short. An uproar of voices was coming from the farmhouse. Then they rushed back to look through the window again, and yes, a violent quarrel was in progress. There were shoutings, bangings on the table, sharp, suspicious glances, furious denials. The source of the trouble appeared to be that Napoleon and Mr. Pilkington had each played an ace of spades simultaneously. So they're playing cards, and they both put the same card on the table, which means they're cheating. 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again, but already knew it was impossible to say which was which. So that was maybe the point, Amir, at the end, that you couldn't tell the difference between a person and a pig. They're both cheating and hurting other people or animals, causing pain in the world. Okay, well, that was the end of Animal Farm. And so, I don't know, I guess maybe I will try. I wasn't thinking about reading The Great Gatsby. I'm curious about it, but I don't know anything about it, really, except that I tried to watch the movie a couple of times and thought it was boring. But maybe because it's supposed to be a classic book, right? Maybe we'll start reading that tomorrow morning. Oh, wait, let me check my schedule. Yeah, so tomorrow at the same time, I'll start reading something. Maybe it will be The Great Gatsby, I guess. I'll have to look into it. And Amir says, well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm reading Charles Dickens at night sometimes. I'm doing David Copperfield. Right now I'm halfway through. It's a very, very long book, 1,500 pages. And I'm somewhere around page 700. But I usually do that. If you're interested, I will be doing that in about 11 hours from now, another chapter from that. That's complicated. So I can't imagine that it would be more complicated than David Copperfield. because the language is very complicated. So, well, we can give it a try. So tomorrow at around the same time, we'll start, I guess, The Great Gatsby. I wasn't planning on that, but let's give it a shot. So hopefully I'll see you again here tomorrow at around the same time. And thank you for everyone who stayed and watched until the end and asked questions. I really appreciate it. And I hope you come back tomorrow when we start, I guess, The Great Gatsby. Okay, I'll see you later. Goodbye.